Welcome to IR Insights Australia, brought to you by Dentons. IR Insights, hosted and featuring members of our National Employment and Safety Team and guests, delivers practical guidance and expert analysis on employment law and workplace relations in Australia. Whether you're listening in or watching along, this series is designed to help employers stay informed and compliant in a rapidly changing regulatory environment, as well as provide actionable strategies to help you manage workforce challenges with confidence. As this is a pre-recorded session, we invite you to send any questions to our dedicated email, irinsights.au@dentons.com. Missed an episode? You can catch previous episodes on our website or search for IR Insights on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Before we begin, we'd like to share an acknowledgement of country from Auntie Munya Andrews.
Nangamalari, I'm Auntie Manya, and on behalf of Dentons and everyone here today, I would like to recognise the stories, traditions and living cultures of the land on which we meet. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and their continued connections to land, sea and community. And we pay our respects to elders past and present. Nangamalari.
Hello everybody and welcome to our first IR Insights of 2026. My name's Paul O'Halloran from Dentons and I'm very pleased to be joined by my colleague in the Employment and Safety Team, Helene Lee. How are you, Helen?
I'm well, thanks, Paul. How are you?
Great, thanks. Now, before we get into today's episode, I just want to let you know some of the topics and guests that we have on the podcast for the remainder of this year. We'll be talking about payroll under pressure coming up, what workplace disasters make front page news, effective resolution of workplace and IR disputes, racial discrimination in the workplace, industrial relations update, forensic evidence in internal investigations, and a workplace mediations masterclass. So hope you can join us for those in the coming month, or months, I should say. Let us know your feedback. You can go to our IR Insights hub on the Dentons website to see what's coming up and to also access past episodes. You can also let us know what you want to hear more about. You can email me at irinsights.au@dentons.com. But for today's episode, we are talking about what really makes a great in-house legal counsel. Beyond knowing the law, the best in-house lawyers are business partners, problem solvers, and trusted advisors. They are people who help companies move forward, not just stay out of legal trouble. So Helen and I are going to break down some of the skills, mindsets, and habits that separate good in-house lawyers from truly great ones. But firstly, a little bit about Dentons for those of you who don't know. Founded in 2013, we are the world's largest law firm by headcount. 12,000 lawyers and 22,000 employees in total globally. So we've increased in size since we did the slide that you can see on the screen if you're watching. We are in 200 locations across 85 countries. Here in Australia, our Employment and Safety Team has a presence in every state, and recently we just had a new employment partner start in Perth, where I'll be tomorrow, in fact. Now, Helen, you've been at Dentons now for over 6 months. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your expertise or background?
Yep, thank you. So I've spent my entire career in workplace law. I had 10 years in private practice before I moved to an in-house role. And in that role, I was general counsel, HR legal for a large telecommunications company. That team had 12 lawyers plus secondees, and our clients were the HR business partners and HR centres of expertise. And then somewhat unusually, I made the move from in-house back to private practice, and have been doing that since 2014. And yeah, as I said, been at Dentons since 1 July last year. Loving it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
great. Yeah, we might get into the move from in-house back to private practice because you don't actually see that happen terribly often. So perhaps as we go through some of our tips for legal counsel today, you might give us some insights into that. As for myself, I've been an employment lawyer for almost 19 years. Haven't really ever worked as an in-house legal counsel myself, but do obviously work with many of them in my capacity as a partner here at Dentons. I did do a 1 month secondment to BHP Billiton Olympic Dam in 2010, and they did offer me a job, um, but I just couldn't see myself living in Olympic Dam, unfortunately. So opportunity lost there. But I do judge the Lawyers Weekly General Counsel Awards on an annual basis each year, and in this context, I do have a bit of an insight into what some of the highest caliber candidates bring to the table as part of that judging process. Now, as you can see from the slides, if you're watching, for those of you who are legal counsel and you are interested in the judging criteria, I'll let you know what it is. It's also publicly available when the awards come out. It can change from year to year. Demonstrated excellence in the provision of legal services, outstanding leadership in your particular area of law, positive contribution to the success of the employer. That might be pro bono work, or it might be AI initiatives, or some other innovative practice measure that's been rolled out within your company. Obviously, knowledge of legal matters or law not previously practiced, or perhaps involvement in a significant case development that's related to your company. What I see in terms of highly ranked candidates and the sorts of legal counsel that often win these sorts of awards, and I should say I'm not the only judge, there's usually about 8 different judges for these awards. Innovation is a big tick for those who have responsibility for the legal department, and that could be AI solutions or various process improvements internally. When they're all carefully articulated in the application process, they seem to be ranked really well. Attraction and retention of staff, big issue really in all businesses, I think, um, and no different for in-house lawyers. There's often a big focus on mentoring junior lawyers in-house, and those in-house counsel that do that really successfully are often ranked quite highly in the Lawyers Weekly Awards. As I mentioned, involvement in complex or high-profile cases, briefing solicitors or counsel is another area of interest, and also work that shows extensive value for senior management. So work that's more than just legal work, but goes the extra mile to business improvement. So what I wanted to talk about today is sort of the architecture of this topic. Um, Really comes from a quite amazing resource that I discovered a couple of months ago when I did doing some research into this topic, and that is Sterling Miller, who some of you may have heard of. He's written a book called, he's actually written 6 books, I think, but his most popular book's called 10 Things You Need to Know as In-House Counsel. Um, and it is a difficult to get hold of book. I think it's actually technically out of print now. So when I went to go and buy it the other day, it's about $220. I think it's a pretty rare commodity, but uh don't worry, we're going to go through some of the content of what Sterling talks about in his book, but it's really insightful stuff. And you can see on the slides, if you're watching, 10 of his tips around what he says are 10 things that you need to know as in-house legal counsel. Now, Helen, I'm gonna go through at least my list here, which is not exactly the same as the list on the slide, and get your contribution from any of these that from your own experience you wanted to contribute to. So one of them I've got here is understand how to add value to the business. And Sterling talks about learning company strategy, priorities, risk profiles, so you can align your legal advice and business goals to what the business wants to achieve, rather than just saying no. You can go on and explain the impact and the alternatives to the business. So this is a little bit different from, I guess, how we sometimes operate as private practitioners, Helen.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, the organisation needs to have, or you can sort of lead from legal strategies in place to ensure that the legal team has the information that it knows to do that. So, when I was in house, the business had start of week meetings. So, they would start at 7 a.m. with the CEO and he would cascade to his direct reports. And then there would be a series of meetings with all of the different employees and teams so that by 11:30 on a Monday morning, everyone across the organisation knew what the key challenges were for the week ahead, things that were coming down the line later that month, things that had happened that needed to be addressed from the previous week. And it meant that you could then manage your priorities within the team really well because you knew what the business was focusing on. So, really critical to have that level of understanding of what's happening in the business.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Now, number two, and recognizing it doesn't match up completely with what we've got on the slides there, but master the basics of contracts, litigation, compliance, and risk. In his book, Sterling talks about being excellent at everyday tasks like drafting contracts and negotiations, managing outside lawyers, and anticipating legal regulatory issues. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, and I think the challenge in house is that there's so many different things you could be doing, both in terms of the reaction space, so when there is an issue that arises, and then what you can see needs to be done more generally. So you need to be really efficient at doing those sort of business as usual tasks, because when a crisis invariably arises, you need to ensure that those other works are still being done and you're not dropping the ball on any of those. So certainly when I was in house, the challenge was often just managing the resources and how we could best make use of our time to have the maximum impact on the business. So we were always looking at tools that could help us triage the requests for advice that were coming in, or reviewing the data that was coming in across the business to see where we had potential issues and we needed perhaps to do a capability build amongst our internal clients.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, good intelligence there. Communicate clearly and simply. I think this is a really important one, whether you're in-house or in private practice. Write and speak in a straightforward language. Executives and business partners care about clarity and the bottom line and the impact, not necessarily interested in the intricate details of cases. So I think we probably all agree that's a really important one.
Yeah, for sure. People are busy and they don't have time to read the lengthy advice. So we always tried to keep any written advice to sort of three-quarters of a page or less. And
Mm.
we used to deliver a lot of advice in the form of a table. So if the business had wanted to do something, we would set out the different options. There'd be the pros and the cons of each of those options, and then a recommendation as to what they should do so that no matter what decision they made, they understood the risks that were informing that decision. But it was in a form that was readily digestible by the business because you just don't know the capability and of all the different people that are reading it because you're never quite sure where your advice may end up.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I remember, working for a particular client who had as its internal stakeholders, its senior employees were scientists, and they would say to me, they love flowcharts.
Yeah.
Don't send them a document with lots of words in it, but send them a flowchart. Now, admittedly, workplace relations is so complex now that it's difficult, not impossible, but difficult to reduce a lot of concepts to a flowchart. But some things can, and we've certainly put, the enterprise agreement process and all those sorts of things into a flow chart. So nice and simple and visual.
Yeah, and something that assists the business so that if they have the same issue 6 months down the track, they've got that as a resource that they can go to build that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this one's probably a topic within itself. Managing priorities and time effectively and productivity. In-house work is constantly shifting. Learn to say not now to certain tasks or people. Avoid unnecessary emails and focus on what matters most. So, I was talking to somebody the other day that was telling me that they refuse to be ruled by email. And just look, probably most of us have email open on one screen all day and things come in. You stop what you're doing, you respond to whatever's come in. That constant, and it can literally happen hundreds of times a day, constant interruption is a real killer for deep thinking and concentration. So they were telling me they actually log their emails off and they check it 6 times a day. And that's how they have deep, extended periods of thinking time just to simply get work done. And also rules about, for example, what meetings they will go to. If you're in-house legal counsel, I'm told you find you getting invited to all sorts of internal meetings. And the question is, do I really need to be at that meeting? Or at least, is there an agenda? These agendaless meetings can sometimes be a massive waste of time. Any thoughts on that, Helen?
The back-to-back meetings, so it would often be back-to-back meetings from 8:30 until 5:30, and then the work of the day would start at 6 o'clock. And initially, I think, particularly when you're new and you're building trust with your stakeholders and your internal clients, you want to be at everything because you think you need to be at everything. But there is a real skill and value in working out, actually. I can be briefed on that afterwards. They just wanted me there just in case. They don't actually need any advice in the moment. So it's
Mm,
so hard to manage your time otherwise because you just lose the whole day to meetings. And then you are actually not looking at your email. So you're almost not doing that six check-ins a day because you're just on so many calls.
yeah, wow,
So you need to be protective of your time.
absolutely. So I'll just quickly go through some more because we could literally, probably spend 2 hours on some of these tips. Build strong internal relationships. Important, I think, really in all workplaces, but if you're the trusted advisor internally as a legal counsel, I think that's going to be an important one. Know when and how to use outside counsel. I think, know your expertise and your limitations and protect the business by knowing when to brief things out. Be strategic, not just reactive. Show and measure your value, which I think is important actually for in-house counsel. The sales team has lots of metrics. The exec team might have lots of reports and metrics, but often the legal team, which is seen as a cost center, doesn't always demonstrate its value. So Sterling Miller talks about track your metrics, communicate your achievements in the legal team to leadership, demonstrate how legal work supports business outcomes. I think that's really important for a lot of legal teams to do that in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. We used to do a sort of a Friday top two, three report. So we would report on the key things that the team were working on that week, and they would be escalated up the line. And it was always a really good way of showing the strategic value that legal was bringing to the business.
Mm,
Another way we could demonstrate that was by building the capability of our internal client base and reducing the litigation risk. So we could say or show the money that was saved by having legal engaged early rather than having legal come in as a reactionary response. So yeah, always critical to demonstrate that you are bringing value and ultimately saving money because you are a cost centre.
mm. Yeah, no, that's great. Finally, maintain professionalism and resilience. And number 10 that I've got here is continue learning and adapting. Keep up with legal trends, AI, legal tech, refine soft skills, negotiation skills, feedback, etc. So, so there's a bit of nuance to all of those, and you can find more information about all of that in Sterling's book. And some of those topics we'll elaborate on a little bit more today. But the one that sort of really jumped out to me, which I liked, which is the header of this particular slide, that if you're watching, is really relates to the topic of being indispensable. He says, no one is indispensable, so never get too comfortable and always keep grinding. He says, if you leave the company, whether voluntarily or not, the company will keep going. And that can be a sobering but important reminder. While you can't be completely irreplaceable, you can make yourself someone who the business does not want to lose. So I guess I adopt that and also put that out there to our listeners in terms of the legal teams that they work in. You really want to be, I assume, the go-to lawyer for being practical, responsive, commercial, and easy to work with. Um, so Sterling says that being indispensable is tied to helping the business achieve its business goals, not just achieving technically correct legal advice. He talks about in-house lawyers thinking like a business person who happens to be a lawyer and cautions against being the department of no instead of being a problem solver who so don't be the department of no who says no, that's illegal, no, can't do that, no, no, no. Instead, be a problem solver who helps the business move forward safely. Thoughts on that, Helen?
It's so critical to think like a business person who happens to be a lawyer, certainly when it comes to your understanding of the business, the commercial drivers, and the pressure points. But then it's also important to sometimes stay in your lane, particularly if legal professional privilege is an important consideration. And the question might be, well, what was the dominant purpose of that advice? So you really need to be clear in your own mind whenever you're advising, am I doing this in my role as in-house lawyer, or am I providing general commercial advice
Mm.
as a business person? So it's just really to be clear in your own mind. But yeah, if you don't understand the business, your advice isn't going to be properly informed, and then you're immediately making yourself not relevant and potentially redundant.
Yeah.
Worst
Yeah,
case
well, I think,
scenario.
yeah, I think that, I mean, I think that was sort of the sentiment. And his goal was, be the person the business most wants at the table when tough decisions are being made. Not someone that's locked out of the most important things that's going on in the business because you're just seen as an obstacle.
Yeah.
Um, so I really loved that advice. It really resonated. Now, another area that I think is where you see legal counsel either really shine or sometimes crash and burn is when there's a crisis. And so the advice here is, although it's a bit negative to prepare for the worst case scenario, but that's what we really do as lawyers. Be crisis ready. Always prepare in advance for a crisis. In my experience, the in-house counsels that really perform poorly are the ones who've not planned for something to go terribly wrong. And ultimately, let's face it, often the legal department or the external lawyer cops the blame for for some uh, crisis internally. It's just so easy to blame the lawyers rather than, anybody else. So when I talk about crisis, what could that be? I've got here, because when I did this preparation, this was a little while ago, it was topical. I've got the Coldplay Kiss Cam incident. Now, I'm not sure you could ever really plan for that, but didn't involve the legal counsel, but it did involve the CEO and the HR director. And maybe there was nothing that that company could do to sort of backtrack from what went wrong there. But in my experience, you don't rise to the occasion in a crisis. You fall back on your preparation. It's very, very rare that a crisis can occur in a company and then just spontaneously you come up with an amazing way to turn things around. The time to prepare is before the crisis hits, um, and that's always going to be really important. As in-house counsel, you probably know where all the bodies are buried. You should know where all the bodies are buried. We see there's a lot of media interest in a lot of the sort of work that we do for clients. And when journalists ask questions, you need to, I think, really understand what they're getting at and be involved in those preparatory situations before there's some sort of a media event. So, speaking to PR experts as well, we would say have a crisis playbook, identify likely scenarios. Now, you may not have a kiss cam incident in your business, but you might have a cyber breach. You may have an investigation by the Fair Work Ombudsman that was unexpected. God forbid, you might have a workplace injury or fatality. These are all things that happen to clients. You might have some other sort of PR scandal. So map out who does what is the role of the legal department, who do you contact immediately? Is that your external lawyers? Is that a PR company? Um, does anyone have experience with writing press releases? All those sorts of things are quite critical because not that you would hope any sort of crisis would happen, but more to the fact that if one does happen, fingers will be pointed at the legal department ultimately, and you'll need some sort of a strategy to deal with that. Even down to who speaks for the company if there is some sort of media interest. It's usually not the lawyers, actually. Um, and just having all messaging legally sound and consistent is really important. So, Helen, any thoughts on crisis management?
I think I agree with all of that. Like you're always trying to avoid the crisis, but I think some level of crisis is inevitable. And there's those issues that you know are likely to blow up. So you want to get everyone around that as early as possible in advance. We used to always operate on the premise that people didn't like surprises.
Mm,
So they need to know what was potentially coming down the line. And then there's sort of like the known crises that you can prepare for, like, for example, workplace incident or investigation or someone leaking critical information. But then there's others just come randomly out of left field. So the key really then is to get everyone on the same page as quickly as possible. But that doesn't mean any sort of responsive action needs to be rushed. And sometimes I think the rushing can make it worse. So a key role in legal sometimes is just to slow things down and work out exactly what needs to be done and the priority in which it needs to be done and how your stakeholders need to be managed as well. Because that crisis management piece also can be really time consuming and has the potential to
mm,
follow up what might have otherwise been a really busy day for you and the team more generally. And there's still the other things that need to be done. So you also need to manage the resourcing as well so that other issues that are just as important don't become a crisis whilst you're managing that immediate crisis. And I think in that moment as well, as you're slowing down and working through various processes and your reactive and proactive media messages and who's going to speak and how do we communicate internally, etc. Just basic practices like taking file notes are really important because there'll be
mm.
so much going on that you'll want to look back later on and know who was doing what, who was accountable for what, and what decisions were made.
Yeah, great advice. And the crises that I've been involved with for various companies over the years, inevitably there is some sort of external review of processes or a desire to find out how did things go wrong.
Yeah,
File notes are so useful in those circumstances. I think the other thing is often the crisis management plan often sits in someone else's portfolio, not necessarily legal. So it could sit under HR or it could sit under a risk and compliance person or a health and safety person, or it may sit in the comms team or somewhere like that. I do think that that is probably something that legal need to have within their remit and could be a shared responsibility, but the post-mortem that inevitably happens, it often involves quite a bit of legal input. A crisis will often result in legal consequences for stakeholders, consumers, employees. So it's pretty rare that it will have nothing to do with the legal team. So bottom line is you can't manage a crisis in real time if you haven't already thought it through ahead of time. So I think that's one of our big tips today.
Yeah, and also just legal asking to have information in relation to business continuity plans so you can see that all the potential issues are appropriately addressed in that plan. And that's a good way
Mm.
of then tracking through who's going to be responsible and assisting with the preparation.
Yeah, for sure. Now, next topic, know what you don't know. I think the most successful legal counsel that I work with are ones that, they know what the capability of their internal team is and they can efficiently and economically do certain pieces of work and tasks internally, but they also know what is outside the scope of their own expertise and their team's expertise. There's no shame, of course, in not knowing the answer to everything. Um, but there's a lot of credit that can go to in-house counsel where they determine certain tasks have to be sent out externally. So that's really the message, and probably a lot of what we do, Helen, is things that are on the periphery, things that are very serious. There might be health and safety incidents or investigations, or they might be underpayment related reconciliations and claims, or obviously litigation, which is sometimes be a big task beyond the size and resource of internal teams. So how did you manage what you didn't know when you were working in-house?
Well, it used to come up either by way of sort of a request for an advice or an issue that was going to have organisational wide implications where there were just so many potential considerations, or then even just being in a meeting where everyone's looking at you to provide the answer and you're like, oh, I'm not 100% sure, I need more time. Think about it. So, not feeling pressured to give an answer in the moment that may well be wrong because you'll give that answer in the moment and everyone will absolutely rely on it. So we were, it was a relatively sophisticated team. So when we were engaging with external lawyers, we were really clear on what we needed advice on, and we would say, what it needs to look like, the questions that we have, what we don't need to know, and then where it was filling a capability gap that we had in the team, we would then use that and work with our firms to build that capability as well internally. Because if the issue has come up once, it's likely to come up again. So that sort of two-way relationship was really important in building that capability within the in-house team. And also just educating your internal clients. You don't know everything, but you will find the answer for them. And once they've got that reassurance, they're a lot more patient about whatever it is they're asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, thinking about value adds and the sorts of things we can offer clients and the other lawyers at Dentons can offer clients, I found a quite successful way that some clients will approach this topic is to say there's new laws on X that our team doesn't know a lot about. Is there somebody at your firm that can give us a 30-40 minute presentation over lunch or over Zoom on these new laws? Because we're just not up to speed to it with it. Um, and I certainly hear in-house lawyers say, I just don't have time to read all the cases that are coming out. And something that we do a lot is a bit of a lunch and learn kind of thing where we read all the current topical cases, and looking at a list that our team did the other day, there's about 30 cases from the last 12 months that are highly relevant to just employment law that we've read and condensed and can describe, 5 minutes per case. So um, there's some interesting value adds, I think, that in-house teams can get from their external providers to fill the gaps.
Yeah, and help them in spotting the issues
Mm,
when something
yeah,
comes up. Yeah.
yeah. Now, another important one that I think sometimes people overlook with lawyers because they think of us as being very sort of academic, but certainly in our practice area and in most, we're people, and having good soft skills and effective soft skills is really important for the in-house lawyer. People skills are just as important as legal skills, uh, and communication really matters more than case law. So to really get across your legal message internally, you need to be able to explain complex legal issues in plain, business-friendly language. If executives can't understand you, your advice won't be followed. Something that I learned many, many years ago from a client is certainly when I do advice, is if the CEO can't read it on his or her phone in a taxi, to another suburb, then you probably have not done a very good job in summarizing the issues and obviously the executive summary. So we always think that, someone's reading our advice on, in the cab to the airport or something on an iPhone, and it's got to be calibrated for that sort of ability to quickly absorb it, pick up the key themes and the conclusions.
Lots of subheadings and bullet points.
Yes, lots of bullet points, preferably a table if possible, and maybe even a flow chart.
Ticking.
Although flowcharts are not so easy to view on phones, but yeah, something to think about. I think also too, having emotional intelligence, know how to read a room if you're in a meeting
Yeah.
internally, when to push, when to listen is critical, when to show empathy. That's all going to help build trust with colleagues at all levels.
Yeah, I think the people skills are critical because you want to be approachable so that issues are coming to your attention. You may need to influence particular outcomes, and then you can be dealing with internal clients where something has gone wrong and they're relying on you to help them fix it. So that trust piece and being that sort of friendly, approachable face is really important. And you might also need to use all of those skills to push for information, particularly if you're not convinced that you've got everything you need to give advice or you've got concerns and you want to know more. You're going to need to rely on other people to get that information for
Mm,
you. And then I think also it feeds into the stakeholder management piece, which is just such a critical part of being in-house. So when something used to come up, one of the first things I used to make myself sort of do would be to ask myself, okay, who else needs to know about this? Because you can get caught up in the doing and forget about who needs to know. And going back to my point before about people not liking surprises, that could be where you would come undone if someone needed to know about something and you hadn't actually managed that message properly. And then you
mm.
need to be able to cut through the noise because obviously everyone's so busy. What's the best way to get that message through? And that's where that relationship piece and knowing people well enough to know how they work and how they like to work. And is it literally 3 lines in an email that they can read in the cab on the way to the airport, but then can call you later about? Then that's the way to do it rather than a 3/4 of a length page briefing paper.
Yeah, great. That's
Tailoring it
great.
on your client.
And of course, it takes ongoing development, as we all know. Having soft skills, I mean, some people have that naturally, but you may, depending on your background and experience, you might need training, you might look for mentors internally or externally. And obviously, it's a great opportunity to observe other good leaders in action. Um, some people have some amazingly persuasive skills just naturally. And I think for us, working with barristers and external professionals like that, we pick up some of those skills in private practice, but you're going to have a range of talented, hopefully, executives internally that you can pick and choose what parts of their soft skills you like or don't like. Um, we've sort of touched on the next one, which is managing litigation with external firms, but I wanted to get your experience too, Helen, but also just elaborate a little bit on firms working successfully with in-house teams. Um, so definitely for us and being workplace lawyers too, we love to see your premises, tours of premises, tours of factories or offices, obviously off the clock, so we can have an understanding of, how people operate in their natural habitat is a great way to, I think, build trust with your external legal teams if you're working with external legal teams, and also for us to understand, how your business actually works in practice. So it's not just an abstract idea. A little bit more difficult for some of our international clients that we don't readily see in person because they're not in Melbourne. They could be anywhere in the world. Um, but that, I think, is a good practice. Also, I think collaboration is a two-way street. So I think legal departments should invest some time in building foundations with their external providers. It's probably not enough to say, oh, it's always the lawyer's fault. They need to do a better job. Probably right a lot of the time. But, what can legal teams do to bring external lawyers that you may need to use from time to time for various different things? What can you do to better equip your team to provide the services in a way that you want? It does surprise me how rarely clients will say, I only want emails with dot points, or don't exceed 500 words, or I only want flowcharts. Now, that does happen. People do ask for the delivery of legal advice in that way. We have got pretty good at trying to understand what our clients want, but we don't always know exactly. What we don't want to have to think is that you get our advice and then you have to redraft it, recut it internally before it can be circulated. Um, so I guess just thinking about how you can communicate your objectives to your external legal team so you're getting what what you want from your external team. Thoughts on that, Helen?
Like any relationship, it requires investment on both sides. So ways or just means of encouraging, your external law firm's understanding of your organisation is really important so that when you're getting the advice, it's fully considered and not given in a vacuum that doesn't take into account any of sort of the practical things that need to be considered. So when I was in-house, we used to meet with our firms sort of every 3 to 6 months, bring them up to speed on what was happening and what we're expecting to see coming down the line. And that used to then actually make it much easier to give instructions because we could refer back to those discussions so they had the context. And look, if there was a lot happening, we would do those briefings more frequently. We'd often get teams or individual lawyers to come in and attend our weekly team meetings. So they could get to know the different lawyers in the team in a sort of slightly more relaxed environment, but also see the other matters that members of the team were working on because a lot of the work was done in-house. It wasn't briefed out. And they could also see the culture of the team and the way in which we all worked together.
Mm,
Secondees was a really critical piece as well. So don't be scared to ask for a secondee for 3, 6, 12 months, whether it's a specific project or just to fill a gap that you might have because of a headcount issue. If policies were being updated or template contracts being updated, we would share all of that collateral with our firms so they had the latest version of things. And it's easier now to do that with share platforms, etc. And then we were always, and sometimes I think it might have frustrated the firms, but we'd say how we wanted the advice. Back to your point, Paul, if we knew what we were doing was ultimately going to feed into a slide deck for an
mm,
exec leadership team, we wouldn't ask for an advice. We'd ask for the slides. Give us the advice in a slide, please, so that we don't have to redo it
yeah.
or recut it. So taking the time to set out exactly what it was that we were seeking, so we weren't wasting time on either side, because obviously the firms are busy as well. And then when we had a large matter kicking off that we knew was going to take some protracted period of time, we'd have that sort of kick-off meeting, get everyone to dinner, talk about the matter and sort of thank them in advance as well for what was going to potentially be a little bit of a bumpy road ahead. But it just made it so much easier to manage the relationship and get the best out of your external lawyers when everyone's busy and under a lot of time pressure.
Yeah, it's a good point with the what we call the kickoff meeting. Just on that, I worked with a general counsel couple of years ago, maybe it was 10 years ago actually, and we actually had a matter in the High Court, and he was very structured and disciplined about how he wanted everyone in the external legal team to work and what he wanted us to work on and the timeframes, the turnaround timeframes, the expectations. So we would have a weekly meeting with him where all the lawyers working on the matter would, be on the agenda and would update him weekly on where we were at with affidavits and, discovery and briefing counsel and all sorts of things. So, don't be scared to tell your lawyers that you have a particular way you like to manage external litigation. Um, we've learned to be very agile, having worked with so many different clients. So that's certainly how some of our clients will operate, and it can be very helpful for us to have that structure and discipline as well.
Yeah, we're doing a number of things at the moment where we have, so there's a weekly stand-up call and an end of week status report that has a dashboard and, the traffic light system, so we can see
Mm.
where are the potential issues. The red makes me nervous, but at least we know what needs to be done on either side to make sure that the client's requirements are being met. So that project management piece to legal advice or litigation, which I don't think used to be done so much back in the day, but lawyers have got better at it.
Yeah, and I think with Teams and Zoom now, it's so much easier to facilitate the group meetings where people are all over the place.
Yeah,
But pre-COVID, it was the speakerphone, or there was probably more email around.
yeah.
Um, Now, I think probably really this is my favorite topic coming up next, which is don't be the Department of No. And it's certainly something that I train my lawyers in my team to respond to think of every problem that we receive as having a solution. And it's rare that we will say to a client, no, you can't do that. And if we do, it's because, inadvertently the solution proposed is actually illegal um, under a piece of legislation. They don't know that, but we do. So there will be very few limitations to that. But the point is, if all the business hears from in-house is no, they'll stop coming to legal, and instead they'll just keep doing risky things without you. So the message here is saying no in the right way instead of a hard no. Explain the risk, offer an alternative pathway, and then balance compliance against business needs. Of course, it's not advising anyone to do something that is going to be inconsistent with the law. Um, but it might be just sometimes a matter of language. So, um, what I try and do if I'm presented with a problem, the client I feel really wants, yes, please just give me the seal of approval so we can go, make 500 people redundant because they're all members of the CFMEU. It might be, it might be, well, no, we can't do that, but maybe we can do X, Y, and Z as an alternative. Or saying, look, if we do that, the consequences will be, you'll have 500 general protections claims, um, and they can be reinstated. So putting some structure around, the hard no. I think too, every battle, pick your battle in a sense. Not every issue requires a hard no. Reserve it for things that are illegal, that are unethical, or pose, an existential risk to the company. I think our message would be you'll build credibility if you can try and be more proactive internally. Which means that when you do have to say absolutely not, that'll be taken seriously because it's quite rare for you to say, no, got to put the brakes on that, absolutely cannot do that. So really, it's a focus on solutions, and a lawyer's job is to help the business succeed safely, not to be an obstacle. Agree with that, Helen?
Yeah, agree completely. So our team sort of tagline was Pathways to Yes. And it was one that we promoted pretty strongly amongst the HR client base because there had been concerns that things were being done and legal wasn't being brought into it, or we were being brought into it at the last minute when options were invariably more limited. So we wanted the business to understand that we would try to get them to where they wanted to be, but doing it awfully, obviously, because we sort of balance that yes piece against obviously the obligation to provide that frank and fearless advice and protect the interests of the organisation. But in sort of 7, 8 years, I can only think of one time where it was a hard no. We were always able to work with the business and HR to get them where they wanted to be. And that's where some of those sort of influencing and soft skills were really important because you might need to suggest something that they're not otherwise considered, or a different timeline, or a staged approach to manage what they wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, the next one is an interesting one, and but a critical one actually, and it's not really my strength, but I think it is your strength, Helen, which is know the numbers. Um, Great lawyers understand that numbers drive the business. It's very difficult, maybe even impossible, to give meaningful legal advice in a vacuum. If you don't understand how the company makes its money, what the margins are, and what the key metrics mean, your advice may not be practical or it may not be aligned with business reality. You do, as an in-house counsel, want to try and speak the same language as the executives. When lawyers frame risks or options in terms of financial impact, cost saved, revenue protected, return on investment, they will gain credibility and influence internally. So my advice here, and this is something that I've, tried to learn in a law firm as well, is know the big three numbers which boards and CEOs obsess over: revenue, profit, and cash flow. Link your advice to these sorts of numbers. Don't just say the contract clause reduces risk. Explain how it protects revenue, avoids fines, or reduces litigation exposure. So the message here is if you do want a seat at the board table or the executive table, you need to know the numbers that everyone else at the table is talking about. And not all lawyers, many lawyers are not good at numbers, I've discovered in my career, which is really interesting. And so maybe you need to do what I had to do, which is go to finance and say, I get sent this spreadsheet every month. I don't actually really understand what it means, and there's a lot of abbreviations in it. What's the purpose of it? Why do we look at it? What are the key elements of this spreadsheet that I should be really focusing on? Um, and it's pretty rare, I would think, probably depends where you work, but it's pretty rare that someone in finance is going to say to you, I'm I don't want to discuss that with you, or um, you should know the answer to that. Usually they'll be thrilled if, someone from legal comes and says, can you just talk me through this for 30 minutes? Um, so that would be my advice with know the numbers. If you are one of those lawyers like me that's not great with numbers, and I would also say there's a lot of great stuff on YouTube about how to read cash flow statements and profit and loss and all of that kind of stuff. You can learn a lot in that space. Yeah. What do you think, Helen?
Yeah, I agree. I'm also one of those lawyers who isn't drawn naturally to numbers. So I was going to these start of week meetings where EBITDA and ROI and margins, etc., were all being discussed, and I had no idea what it actually meant. So I had to do exactly that, go to finance and ask for a bit of a 101 about what it meant in practice, and so that I could understand the implications for what we might be doing as a team. So that was sort of at the business level, and then had to have or I had regular meetings with finance as well, just to understand like my own numbers and the budget and our
Mm.
external legal spend and what levers could I pull, etc., if that budget was going to be reduced. So I think taking the time to invest in your own development invariably saves you a lot of time and angst down the line.
Yeah.
And then it means you can just provide more meaningful advice and understand what's driving things. Otherwise, you're just operating in a bit of a vacuum and you might miss a really critical point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. Now, finally, I think it's final slide. Stay on top of legal trends, sort of goes without saying, but as in-house counsel, you really do need to keep up, with legal developments and what's happening in the business world. You can't credibly be a trusted advisor to C-suite if you really, if your knowledge is out of date. Make your professional learning a habit. Block out time each week to read industry or law firm publications, legal alerts. You probably all get them from all sorts of law firms. There's a lot of good information out there. Regulator updates and business news. Some things that I like for key clients, I love Google Alerts, really simple things to get emails that are coming through about things that are in the news about specific companies. There's certain newsletters that I subscribe to. So that's a really good way to update your knowledge. Obviously, Dentons provides a lot of opportunity for that. Our IR Insights webinars being one example. We also have the Dentons Global Client Experience Program, which is being rolled out very shortly with lawyers all across the Dentons network on a range of different topics. Currently advertised on LinkedIn, so you can search for that on LinkedIn if you're interested in signing up for those free webinars. And also listen to the business. What are the executives talking about? What are the trends, not just legal trends, but what are the commercial, cultural, and technological issues that are coming up in higher level meetings that perhaps you need to spend a little bit more time thinking about? Spend time with business leaders to understand what's coming down their pipeline. Um, we are so lucky in our jobs as external lawyers. We get to learn so much about so many different types of businesses in so many different types of industries. But there are themes that we see emerging. Um, so, catch up with your friends in-house in other companies and external as well, just to find out in a casual, unstructured way what's going on out there in the world. When in-house, Helen, did you have any particular preference for professional learning?
We used to have briefings, so sort of those lunchtime learn things. And then emails, sort of targeted emails on an update rather than sort of a mass mail out used to be really helpful. And we used to also track the issues that we were seeing internally. So we'd analyse the data to see if so for example, if there were a whole lot of unfair dismissal claims, is it just that a particular part of the business is focusing on performance management, or do we have some broader systemic failure that we need to address by way of training? So always looking at what was coming and happening internally. And a consistent theme and one that we regularly provided support to internal clients on was around legal professional privilege and just managing the education piece on that as well.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
don't be afraid to ask for the briefing or the lunchtime session or the targeted email. Always very happy to provide that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because we do have a lot of um, representatives from companies that watch and listen to our webinars that are not necessarily clients. So if there is a topic that your legal team wants to hear more about, there's no harm in asking us if there is someone that can do a presentation or a lunch briefing on that. You'd be surprised. It's also a way for us to upskill our own teams in very niche areas. So always open to hearing those requests. So probably tomorrow, Helen, you'll get 500 requests to speak about something incredibly complex, but always happy to think about it. Um, so that actually brings us to the end of our presentation today. Any final thoughts, Helen?
No, I think other than to say, I think in-house is like both a rewarding and a really tough job at times. So don't ever hesitate to reach out and ask for assistance. And I used to find that sometimes a 20-minute phone call could save a whole world of angst
Yeah,
further down the line.
yeah, agree. And look, we do that with barristers too.
Yeah,
Bring up barristers and say, look, this is a issue I've never come across before. What do you think about it? And it's surprising how many times they say, well, that's really interesting because there is this case that's being appealed at the moment that deals with XYZ issue.
yeah.
Um, so great advice. Well, thanks everybody for listening. To stay on top of future topics and to listen to past episodes, please view our IR Insights hub on the Dentons website. If you have any questions or feedback or ideas about future topics, please email us at irinsights.au@dentons.com. You can also listen to our podcasts on Apple Podcasts and Spotify by searching for Dentons Australia IR Insights. Until next time, we hope you have a great week. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.